So, if you're one of those people whose job it is to serve, maybe you're in medicine or teaching or you're a first responder, you know the pressure, you know the emotional toll it takes. Today, we're diving into a really powerful way of thinking that can transform that high-stress work from a one-way ticket to burnout into a practice that you can actually sustain and that feels meaningful. And this quote, man, it just gets right to the heart of it all, doesn't it? It's that moment after all the chaos, after the technical stuff is done, that's when the real challenge actually begins. That's the space where we're either broken or we're built. Okay, section 1, the true cost of service, because it goes so far beyond just the clinical procedure. Picture this, a 42-minute resuscitation. The team does everything perfectly, by the book, technically flawless. But the monitor, it just stays flat. The code is terminated, the procedure, it's over. But the real cost? Well, that's what comes next. And that's the moment, right? The moment it all just crystallizes. You see a family photo sitting on the bedside table, or you just see a name on a chart, and all of a sudden, the code in room 8 becomes a person, a human tragedy. And that feeling, that heartbreak, that is the real weight these professionals are carrying around every single day. Which, of course, leads to the big question, the one that hangs over anyone in a service profession. How on earth do you keep your heart open for years or even decades doing this work without the sheer weight of it all completely destroying you? So now for section 2, a path for the heart. What's the answer? Well, the framework we're exploring today introduces something called Bhakti. It's not about putting up emotional walls or just chasing technical perfection. The path is devotion. It's about reframing the work itself as a form of sacred service. So think of it like this. There are basically 3 different paths you can take. If you rely only on your head, all knowledge, all intellect, you're probably going to end up cynical. If you rely only on your hands, just the action, the doing, you risk burnout, especially when you don't get the results you want. But this third path, the path of the heart, devotion, that's presented as the only one that's truly sustainable in the long run. And here is the absolute game changer with Bhakti. It's a fundamental shift in your perspective. You're moving your focus away from the outcome. Did the patient live? Did the student pass? And you're putting it squarely on your intention. Was the action itself an offering of your absolute best, done with reverence and with care? And this isn't some new idea, It's rooted in ancient wisdom, and it's summarized perfectly by this passage from the Bhagavad Gita. The idea is that every single thing you do, no matter how small or routine it seems, can be transformed into a sacred offering. The meaning is found in the act of giving itself. So let's look at the contrast here, because it's powerful. On one hand, you have that soulless, technical approach. It's efficient, sure. You follow the algorithm, pronounce, document, clock out. But it leaves everyone, you, the team, the family, feeling empty. But then you have the Bhakti approach. It's the same technical excellence, but it's infused with this sense of sacred duty. The team takes a conscious pause to honor a human life. And that one small shift makes all the difference. Section 3, a sustainable practice. We're talking about building an ethical framework for compassion. Now, this idea of devotion is beautiful. It really is. But it brings up a super critical question. How do you actually make it sustainable? This is the big objection, right? The first thing you think is, wait a minute. If I'm more present and more compassionate, won't I just burn out even faster? The fear is that opening your heart more is just going to lead to more pain. But the old way, building emotional walls, just being numb, that's just a slow death of the spirit. There has to be another way. And this is the alternative. This is how you make it work. Sustained devotional service isn't about just raw, unprotected emotional exposure. No way. It's a balanced equation. You need compassion, yes, but it has to be protected by clear boundaries. And it needs both institutional support and personal practices to actually last. All 4 of these pillars, they're non-negotiable. At the heart of all this is a really critical concept called moral distress. This is that gut-wrenching feeling when you know what the right thing to do is. You know a patient needs more of your time, or your team desperately needs a real debrief, but the system, because of short staffing or just bureaucracy, won't let you do it. That friction, that is what destroys devotion. And that's why institutional support is pillar number 1. You just can't demand devotion from people inside a system that is actively burning them out. In fact, one study found a staggering 40% drop in retention for the most compassionate staff when that institutional support was missing. 40%. But look, you can't just sit around and wait for the system to become perfect. That brings us to pillar number 2, personal practices. These are the small, intentional rituals that help you separate your action from the outcome. Things like setting an intention before your shift starts, taking just a 10-second pause to breathe and reconnect in the middle of the chaos. And this one is so important, having a ritual to release the day before you go home. Okay, section 4, devotion in action. Let's get practical. What does this actually look like day to day? We're going to talk about how this philosophy applies to your team, to the families you serve, and, of course, to yourself. So for your team, new ethical guidelines are actually mandating 2 different types of debriefing. First, there's the hot debrief. This happens right after a traumatic event, and its only purpose is emotional processing and validation. That's it. Then you have the cold debrief, which happens a day or 2 later. That's for the technical review, but just as importantly, for a real, sustained emotional check-in to catch any long-term distress. When we talk about families, devotion is really an offering of your time and your presence. Just think about the night and day difference between a rushed, 90-second death notification and a Bhakti-based approach that commits to 20 minutes, actually sitting down, being present, and bearing witness to someone's grief instead of just running from it. But let's be real, what about those really tough cases? The patient with chronic substance use, where it's so easy to feel judgment or just exhaustion. This is where devotion becomes a conscious, deliberate choice. It's a choice to override that gut instinct and offer the exact same level of reverence and care to every single person, no matter what. So when you boil it all down, it seems to come to these 3 powerful keys for a career that doesn't just last, but actually means something. First, you have to accept that devotion is its own reward. The meaning is in the action, not the result. Second, maintain fierce, non-negotiable boundaries to protect your own well-being. And third, demand the institutional support you need. Advocate for your own sustainability. This quote from the parents of a trauma survivor, it just perfectly captures the difference, doesn't it? Technical competence, that can save a life. But devotion, the act of truly caring about their life, that's what creates real, lasting human connection and healing. And that's really the bottom line here. If you rely only on competence, you're setting yourself up for burnout. If you rely only on knowledge, you can become a cynic. But choosing devotion, viewing your work as a sacred offering, that has the power to transform it into a practice that doesn't just empty you out, but somehow fills you back up. So I want to leave you with this question, something to really think about in your own life. When you think about your work, what's one small, specific act of reverence or one small practice of release that you could introduce today to turn your most draining task from a burden into a conscious offering?